Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Let me take you straight to the moment everything in my life changed, because there's no point in easing into heartbreak. A candle was burning out on the kitchen table. That's where I was standing, still holding my wife's forgotten keys in one hand and a carton of oat milk in the other. When I heard her say it, not to me, to someone on speakerphone. I hate when he hugs me. It makes me feel trapped, like I'm being held by guilt, not love. I didn't move, I didn't cough, I didn't even blink. Because the woman saying that was Mavis, my wife of 12 years, and the he in that sentence was me. That's not the kind of sentence you come back from. That's the kind of sentence that makes oat milk expire in your hand, while your heart rewrites the last decade of your life. I stood there, maybe 3 feet from her, close enough to see her reflection in the window above the sink. She was twirling the phone cord around her finger. Yes, she still uses a landline for some reason, completely unaware that her husband was frozen in the next room, listening to his own soul dissolve in real time. The woman on the phone, I think it was her cousin from Boston, laughed and said something like, "Then why do you let him?" Mavis replied, almost too calmly, "Because he's harmless. He means well. But sometimes I just wish he'd stop trying." That was the part that got me. Not the hatred for the hugs, not the trapped bit, but the word harmless. Like I was a stray cat scratching at the door. Like I was more inconvenience than man. I didn't confront her. I didn't slam anything. I didn't even exhale. I just backed away from the kitchen like it was a crime scene I had no business being near. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway for 3 hours. I listened to an entire jazz album I didn't even like, just to avoid going back inside. When I finally did, she was asleep, peacefully, dreaming maybe, of a life where my arms didn't exist. So I stopped hugging her. The next day I left her keys exactly where she'd find them, next to the oat milk on the counter. A quiet act of service. Still trying, even when I knew I shouldn't. But here's where it turns from sad to unreal, because 5 days later, I found a package in the mail addressed to her from someone named Corin. I wouldn't have opened it, but it ripped halfway from the rain. Inside was something I still can't fully process. And that's where part 2 begins. I didn't tell her I saw the package. I placed it back on the console table, perfectly resealed with a bit of tape and my shaking hands. She opened it later that evening while I was in the shower. I know because I came out to find the packaging gone and the scent of something unfamiliar lingering in the hallway, like a cologne that didn't belong to me. For the next 3 days, she was glued to her phone more than usual, always turning it face down, always stepping out to take calls with some vague excuse like, "It's work. I'll be quick," but it was never quick, and it was never work. Mavis worked from home writing technical copy for a hearing aid company. Nobody from that office was calling at 10:45 p.m. on a Sunday. I started noticing more. A new shade of lipstick, darker than what she normally wore. A playlist on our shared account labeled Driving Vibes, filled with sultry R&B that she once told me gave her migraines. And then, the biggest clue of all, she started locking the bedroom door when she changed. Mavis had never been modest. She used to leave the bathroom door open while brushing her teeth, humming, talking with a mouthful of foam, laughing at her own ridiculousness. But now, I was just an intruder in my own home. I tried to bring it up gently, asked her if she was feeling distant lately or overwhelmed, and she gave me a smile so practiced it could have been printed. "You're imagining things, Elle," she said, tapping my shoulder like I was a child needing reassurance. "You always overthink everything." That sentence alone almost broke me more than the one I overheard in the kitchen. Then came the night of the dinner party. Just 6 people, close friends, 2 couples we'd known since our wedding, and 1 new guy. Mavis introduced him as a colleague helping on a side project. His name was Corin. Yes, the same name from the package. I felt my stomach cave in as he shook my hand, his grip firm and eyes locked just a little too long on hers. Throughout the evening, they shared inside jokes I didn't understand, finished each other's thoughts like they were rehearsed. I laughed when it felt appropriate, nodded along like I wasn't unraveling. That night, after everyone left, she kissed my cheek and said, "Thanks for being so chill tonight." I nodded and went to sleep on the couch. What she didn't know was that I had already made a decision, not to confront, not to fight, but to document, to quietly collect the evidence of what I already knew, because part of me needed to see it before I could walk away. And the next morning, that evidence would come in the form of a deleted text that I managed to recover. The thing about Mavis was that she always thought she was smarter than me, and to be honest, she usually was. She could juggle 6 browser tabs, organize a weekend trip in 20 minutes, remember birthdays from both sides of the family, and still correct the grammar in a marketing email while reheating soup. But her biggest weakness, her fatal flaw, was that she underestimated how quiet people like me observe everything, and how we remember. She had deleted the text. I wasn't supposed to see it. But she didn't realize that our devices were still synced to the same cloud account. Not for spying purposes, just one of those conveniences that couples never bother to update when everything seems fine. I saw the message late that night on my old iPad, the one she thought was broken. The message was short, chillingly short. He has no idea. Feels like I'm cheating on a ghost sent by Corin. Her reply, only minutes later, read, "I know. He's harmless. I almost feel bad." That last line hit me like a sledgehammer. Almost. She almost felt bad about emotionally erasing the man who did her taxes, fixed her car mirror after a parking accident, and spent 2 weeks learning how to cook gluten-free because of a phase she was trying out. I stared at the screen for nearly an hour, not reading, just absorbing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a blanket, even though it was cold, even though my bones ached from days of quiet pretending. The silence wrapped around me like a cocoon of shame. I wasn't even angry. I just felt erased, like I was watching my own life play out through a dusty window. Every moment with her now felt retroactively false, like her laughter had been dubbed over by someone else, and I was only now noticing the lip sync was off. The next morning, I acted normal. I made her coffee, 2 sugars, no milk. I even folded her scarf the way she liked, the way her mom taught me the first Thanksgiving we spent together. She didn't notice, or maybe she did, and didn't care. But I noticed everything. How she tucked her phone under her arm the second it vibrated. How she lingered in the car an extra minute after pulling into the driveway. How she never asked me how I was doing, not once. That afternoon, while she was out running errands, I finally opened the drawer she told me never to touch. The one she once joked held old journals and embarrassing college poems. But there were no poems, no notebooks. What I found instead was a plane ticket and a letter with no envelope, a letter addressed not to me, but to him. The letter wasn't long, but every word was deliberate. I read it once, then again. By the 3rd time, I realized my hands had gone numb. It wasn't folded like something tucked away for the future. It was left open, facing up, like it had already been read and reread by the person it was meant for. Just not me. The handwriting was unmistakably Mavis's. I could recognize her looping L's anywhere. She started it with Corin and didn't bother with a dear. That absence said enough. You don't write dear to someone you're already emotionally naked with. She wrote about how she felt alive when she was with him, like someone had finally woken her up. She said I was good, kind, dependable, all words that sounded more like traits you'd assign to a rescue dog than a husband. And then came the part that's been playing on repeat in my head ever since. He means well, but when he hugs me, it feels like I'm disappearing. I don't want to vanish anymore. That was the moment I realized. It wasn't just that she didn't love me. She resented me. For what, I still can't quite figure out. For being predictable, for staying, for not being exciting enough to distract her from whatever she felt was missing. The plane ticket was tucked underneath the letter. One way, San Diego, departure date, 3 weeks from now. It wasn't even booked under her full name, just M. Hale. Maybe she thought that would make it harder to track. Maybe she was planning to leave without a fight, or worse, without a goodbye. She hadn't packed anything yet, but I could feel the house pulling away from me piece by piece. I even noticed some of her books missing from the shelf in the living room. Subtle things, like she was already halfway gone and didn't think I'd notice. But I noticed everything. I always have. I just never wanted to believe that the woman I married would choose to disappear without saying a word. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat on the edge of our bed, holding a letter meant for someone else, in the room where I had once asked her to marry me, the same room where she said yes while laughing through tears, the same room where, just weeks ago, I had tried to cuddle her while she faked sleep. It felt like my life had been written in invisible ink, and someone had just turned on the blacklight. All the messages I missed were suddenly screaming at me from the walls. She was done with me. She had been done for a long time. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a dramatic scene. No confrontation, no last-minute pleas. If she was ready to disappear, I'd help her, in my own quiet way. Because the next step wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a mirror, and she had no idea I was already setting it up. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, one arm under the pillow she used to rest her head on when we still slept tangled together. I listened to her quiet breathing in the next room, the guest room, which had recently become her sanctuary, as if the bed we'd shared for over a decade had somehow grown thorns. At some point around 3:30 a.m., I got up and started writing. Not a note, not a letter, just thoughts. Ugly, insecure, bitter thoughts that I would never say out loud. Things like, was I ever enough? Was I ever anything more than convenient? Was she pretending even when she said yes at the altar? The next morning, I went through our closet and started boxing up my own things, slowly, quietly, one drawer at a time. I wasn't leaving yet, but I wanted to be ready. She noticed, I'm sure. She had to. I left the suit I wore on our wedding day folded neatly in the open suitcase on purpose. She never asked about it. That was her style. She avoided uncomfortable truths like they were contagious. She preferred silence over conflict. It's funny, actually. That used to be my favorite thing about her. Now, it felt like the rope I was slowly hanging myself with. The day after that, I bought a small notebook and started documenting every little change in her behavior. Not because I wanted to use it against her, but because I needed something to ground me in the middle of the gaslighting storm I knew would come if I ever called her out. Page 1, Monday, deleted text from Corin, recovered. Feels like I'm cheating on a ghost. Page 2, Tuesday, plane ticket, one way, San Diego. Departure, May 14th. Name, M. Hale, page 3, Wednesday, letter found in drawer. When he hugs me, I disappear. By Friday, I had 9 pages filled with small betrayals, things most people would overlook, but I saw them all. That weekend, she went to visit her sister. At least, that's what she said. I didn't believe her for a second. So while she was gone, I did something that I knew crossed a line. I opened her laptop, same password she always used, the name of her first dog and the year she graduated college. What I found confirmed what I already knew, but had hoped I was wrong about. A folder named Project Coastline. Inside, emails, hotel confirmations, photos of the two of them on a hiking trail I didn't recognize. She had even sent him a Spotify playlist titled Start Over Songs. That one hit harder than I care to admit. But the most painful thing I found wasn't digital. It was handwritten again. A draft of a goodbye letter to me, tucked under her laptop sleeve. She hadn't sent it yet. Hadn't even finished it. It started with, Ellery, I hope one day you'll understand, and ended halfway through a sentence about how I deserved someone who really saw me. That was the moment I decided. I wouldn't wait for her to finish that letter. I'd write my own ending. The moment I decided to leave wasn't loud. There wasn't some cinematic outburst or slamming door. It happened while I was refilling the bird feeder in the backyard. A sparrow landed on the fence just a few feet away and stared at me like it knew I didn't belong there anymore. I stood still, holding the bag of seed, and thought, you're still here because it's familiar, not because it's safe. That's when it clicked. I wasn't afraid of losing Mavis. I was afraid of losing the version of myself I had built around her. And that version had already been abandoned by the woman who used to hold his hand under restaurant tables and text him poetry during meetings. I began moving money into a separate account she didn't know about, just a little at a time, enough to avoid suspicion. I found a temporary place across town through a coworker who had a guest suite and no questions. I canceled my gym membership and signed up somewhere else. I switched my pharmacy, changed my voicemail greeting, and started forwarding mail to a P.O. box. Every step felt like erasing a fingerprint. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted her to see the reflection of the life she threw away, without me having to shout a single word. And then came the key detail. My final quiet message. I took down the framed photo of us in Costa Rica, the one from our 5th anniversary, and replaced it with a printout of the text from Corin, the one she thought was deleted. I formatted it like a poem. I even centered it on the page and used the same font she liked for her blog. Then I slid it back behind the glass. So, when she looked at that picture next time, when she smiled at the memory of the waves behind us, she'd see the truth buried underneath. I didn't leave a note. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even leave a voicemail. Just one text, sent at 6:12 a.m., before I turned my phone off for good. Check behind the frame. I closed the door gently behind me. No suitcase, just a backpack. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I had, I might have folded. I might have gone back and asked why she didn't love me anymore, even though I already knew the answer. That was 3 days ago. I haven't heard from her yet. Maybe she hasn't found the message, or maybe she did. And finally realized that ghosts don't slam doors when they leave. They vanish while you're still pretending they're there. The first message didn't come until day 5. Not a phone call, not an apology, just a text. Where are you? No punctuation, no emotion. As if she'd misplaced her phone charger, not her husband. I stared at it for a full minute before locking the screen again. I wasn't ready, not to respond, not to re-engage. I had slipped out of that life like a shadow leaving the frame. And I wasn't about to go crawling back into the dark just because she finally noticed the light was gone. 2 hours later, another message. Did you leave because of what I said? That one stung. Because there were so many things she said. I wondered which part she thought I'd heard. The part where she said hugging me made her skin crawl. Or the part where she told Corin it felt like she was cheating on a ghost. The worst part wasn't even the words. It was the fact that she had said them so casually. Like I was a background hum in her life. Something easy to ignore until it disappears completely. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote down everything I was feeling. It was a mess of anger and grief and disbelief. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't editing myself. I wasn't tiptoeing around her moods or pretending not to notice the quiet disdain in her tone. I wrote like someone who had just learned how to speak again, and then I closed the notebook and went for a walk. That's when I saw her, not Mavis, him, Corin, standing outside her office building like he belonged there, talking to someone on the phone, laughing, completely unaware of the storm he had helped unleash. I stood across the street, half hidden behind a row of parked cars, my heart pounding like I was watching something illegal. He didn't look impressive. He wasn't taller than me, wasn't sharper. But there was an ease in his posture, like a man who hadn't been erased from the life he helped build. I wondered if he even knew about me, if Mavis had told him the truth, or just enough to make herself look like the victim. That night, she texted again. Please talk to me. This time, I typed something, just 3 words. Check the drawer. Then I deleted it. I wasn't ready yet. Not because I still loved her, but because I hadn't decided what kind of man I wanted to be at the end of this story, the one who burned it all down, or the one who simply walked away and left her in the ashes she made. It's been 11 weeks since I left. I still haven't responded to her last message. In total, she's sent 7 texts, left 2 voicemails, and even emailed me once with the subject line, "We need to talk." But we don't. Not anymore. Because in the time since I vanished from the life she thought I'd never leave, I've begun remembering who I was before I wrapped my identity around someone else's cold indifference. That version of me, the quiet one, the one who mistook silence for peace and withdrawal for maturity, is gone. What remains is someone learning how to live again. And it started, surprisingly, with a stranger at a bookstore. I was browsing the philosophy section when a woman, probably mid-30s, paint on her fingertips, hair pulled into the messiest bun I've ever seen, looked at the book I was holding and said, "That one's overrated. You want something that makes you angry before it makes you wise." I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in months. We ended up talking for almost an hour about books, tea, and why people ruin their own happiness without realizing it. Her name was Isla. We haven't gone on a date or anything, but we've met up 3 times now, just to talk. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like a ghost. I feel visible. Mavis never did find the letter I left behind. At least, she never mentioned it. I tucked it into the back of her favorite book, the one she only pretended to read to impress friends. It was short and simple. Just 2 lines. You said hugging me felt like vanishing. So, I let go. I hope you feel free now. I don't hate her. I don't even blame her anymore. Some people leave you slowly, over years. Others walk out in a flash. She just happened to do both. As for me, I've started writing again, not just in notebooks I hide away. I've been submitting essays anonymously, little pieces of my story woven into fictional names. It feels good to be heard without needing to be known. Healing doesn't come in one grand moment. It comes in whispers, in tiny winds, in a stranger's laugh, in a warm cup of coffee, in the space where pain used to live, now filled with breath and light and quiet hope. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt invisible in a relationship, or quietly walked away from a love that forgot how to see you, just know you're not alone. In the comments, tell us, what moment in history do you think changed everything, but started in silence? And don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more real stories that prove healing is always possible, even when the goodbye is quiet.